James Madison was shy, studious, and physically frail, hardly the image of a bold statesman. But he's widely known as the father of the Constitution.
That thinking through of the problems and trying to find a solution so that free government could finally work, really for the first time in the history of the world, that deserves some kind of title.
He drafted the Virginia Plan, which became the basis for the Constitution, and after having initially resisted the Bill of Rights, he changed his mind and ultimately drafted it. He also had a knack for finding moderate compromises between the more extreme positions of Hamilton and Jefferson. His quiet, deliberative work built the foundation of American democracy. What does tranquility in politics look like? Is it calm self-mastery or the quiet strength to shape a nation?
Madison did his homework more than anyone else. He read all kinds of books and prepared to try to figure out how free government could finally work in the world. And he thought he had maybe found the solution.
Hello, friends. I'm Jeffrey Rosen, President and CEO of the National Constitution Center, and this is Pursuit, the Founder's Guide to Happiness. We explore what the pursuit of happiness really meant to our founders and what we can learn from their daily struggles to achieve self-improvement. My guests for this 9th of 12 episodes are Professor of Politics Colleen Sheehan, author of The Mind of James Madison, The Legacy of Classical Republicanism, and filmmaker Ken Burns, whose new film on the American Revolution premieres November 16th.
Most of us carried into the convention profound impressions, produced by the experienced inadequacy of the old Confederation, and by the monitory examples of all similar ones, ancient and modern, as to the necessity of binding the states together by a strong constitution. The necessity of such a constitution was enforced by the gross and disreputable irregularities which had been prominent in the internal administrations of most of the states. Nor was the recent and alarming insurrection headed by Shays in Massachusetts without a very sensible influence on the public mind. Such indeed was the aspect of things that, in the eyes of the best friends of liberty, a crisis had arrived, which was to decide whether the American experiment was to be a blessing to the world or to blast forever the hopes which the Republican cause had inspired. James Madison describing his time at the Constitutional Convention in a letter dated December 28, 1821.
Colleen Sheehan, it is an honor to welcome you to the podcast, and we're here to talk about James Madison. He was born in 1751 in Virginia. He studied English and Latin, and then he graduated from the College of New Jersey, which was Princeton. He studied at Princeton with President Witherspoon, who had a great influence on him. Tell us about his early education and how that influenced his thinking.
Madison was both a politician and a scholar, but first and foremost, a scholar. Like most people of his means in the 18th century, he had a very good education, a private tutor. When he went to College of New Jersey, it took him 10 days to get there. Imagine that. From Virginia to New Jersey, it took 10 days. And his schedule there was grueling. They were up at morning bell, I think it was 5 a.m., and virtually the entire day was spent in study, recitation, tutoring, reading, and so forth. He studied all of the, what we would today call liberal arts. They had to translate huge bodies of text from Latin to English, English to Greek, and so forth. And of course, he stayed on an extra year to study with President Witherspoon, to study particularly Hebrew. And we find some indications in the papers he left behind that he is trying to figure out the nature of the universe and the questions that have to do with nature and God. President Witherspoon was, of course, a man of the Scottish Enlightenment. And I think Madison learned a great deal from Witherspoon about questions of political philosophy and moral philosophy. After college, Madison did quite a lot of public service, whether it was at the state level, then at the continental level, and then ultimately at the U.S. level, particularly in the area of legislation. It would only be later in his life that he would venture into the executive branch. And he never, of course, served in the judiciary, but he did serve in the other two.
Witherspoon taught Madison something called faculty psychology. The idea is that the soul is divided into certain faculties or powers, and we have to achieve the same harmony and balance in the constitution of the soul as we do in the constitution of the state. Talk about how the Enlightenment and classical thinkers Madison read saw a connection between personal and political self-government.
Well, first of all, on that question of faculties, Jeff, I think that is incredibly important in Madison's thought, and it really hasn't been paid all that much attention to. I was rereading the Federalist Papers last year when I was teaching a class, and, that's a wonderful thing to do, by the way.
As long as the reason of man continues fallible, and he is at liberty to exercise it, different opinions will be formed. As long as the connection subsists between his reason and his self-love, his opinions and his passions will have a reciprocal influence on each other, and the former will be objects to which the latter will attach themselves. The diversity in the faculties of men, from which the rights of property originate, is not less an insuperable obstacle to a uniformity of interests. The protection of these faculties is the first object of government. From the protection of different and unequal faculties of acquiring property, the possession of different degrees and kinds of property immediately results, and from the influence of these on the sentiments and views of respective proprietors, ensues a division of the society into different interests and parties. Federalist number 10, James Madison.
So I was rereading Federalist 10. I started thinking about that line, that the protection of the faculties is the first object of government. Now, oftentimes, how that's interpreted is that Madison said the protection of property is the first object of government, because he does go on after he says the protection of the various faculties is the first object of government. And from the protection of these faculties, society is divided into different degrees and kinds of property and so forth. But he doesn't say the protection of property is a first object of government. He says it's the protection of the faculties. What does that mean? The faculties are all the kinds of things like reason, memory, will. So there can be physical faculties, but also faculties of the mind. That's what makes human beings human. And so I think what Madison is saying when he says the protection of the various faculties is the first object of government is that the purpose of government is to protect us in our humanity. And what it means to be human most fundamentally is to have self-agency. The purpose Madison saw in all of this more than anything else was to find a way to establish a government in which we Americans could demonstrate the capacity of mankind for self-government. But the question is, are they able to govern in such a way that they govern justly? Well, we know Madison talks about all kinds of systems, things like separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism, bicameralism, institutional arrangements. But in the end, Madison tells us it's a dependence on the people. Harriet Beecher Stowe summarized that in this phrase: he who cannot govern himself cannot govern others.
So, a constitution has to deploy reason to moderate unreasonable passions at the constitutional level. And that is why he defines a faction in Federalist 10 as any group, a majority or a minority, animated by passion rather than reason, devoted to self-interest rather than the public good.
Yeah, well, this is something you do such a great job of in your book, talking about pursuit of happiness and how oftentimes that's been misunderstood today, right? We think today when people say happiness, they think, well, if it feels good, that must make you happy. And of course, that's not what they were talking about, because they were always connecting the idea of happiness with the idea that human beings have a purpose in life. and that it's more than just mere existence. Or as Socrates put it, it's not mere life, it's the good life. It's not merely living, it's living well. And we see that all through the thinkers from Socrates to Plato to Aristotle to Augustine and Aquinas and Maimonides and Alfarabi, and certainly through many of these Enlightenment thinkers. And so, well, the Greeks thought of it like a charioteer with two horses, right? A black horse and a white horse. And the black horse and the white horse represented passion and spiritedness. And the charioteer was the center of the soul, which was reason. But I think it's important in saying that to understand that that doesn't mean that passions are bad or that interests are bad, because there are base passions, but there are also noble passions. Love is a passion. And that's where we can educate our souls. And Madison's idea is that's what it would mean to be self-governing at the level of the individual. But to the extent that it's possible, the republic, through a civic education, could perhaps guide us to loving things that are worth loving. Not doing it for us, not telling us what to do, but providing a kind of environment that's conducive to that.
And Madison wants to create the same balance in the constitution of the state as we create in our soul. And he does that with a complicated mix of separation of powers and federalism to slow down deliberation, to prevent mobs from forming and ensure that by the time deliberation takes place, reason rather than passion prevails. Madison puts such an emphasis on the importance of time to prevent hasty decision-making. And he distinguishes between the momentary passion of the mob and the considered deliberative judgment of the public. And said the whole point of the Constitution is to prevent the formation of factions and hope that permanent factions would never take hold. But he has reached the sobering conclusion that in every political society, parties are unavoidable, as he put it.
Yeah, I think that he always thought that parties are unavoidable because he says human beings have opinions, passions, and interests, right? The latent causes of factions that he talks about. And he says as long as we're free to form our opinions, we're going to form different ones because human reason is fallible. And then because we have passions, our passions oftentimes attach themselves to our opinions. So he always thought that parties, by which he just means parts, right? All factions are parties, but not all parties are factions. Not all parties are unjust, because factions by definition are unjust, contrary to the rights of others or to the common good. He thinks the Federalists are too focused on a kind of what we would today call elitist way of governing. They think they're supposed to be elected to office and just make their decisions without necessarily consulting the people, public opinion. You know, that's the trustee theory of representation. And Madison says no. He doesn't go with the anti-federalist idea of the mirror theory, where you're just supposed to reflect the people's views. He wants their views refined and enlarged, but he wants public opinion to matter. So the Republican Party that he and Jefferson form has to do with their opposition to what they call the anti-republicanism of people like Hamilton and others. They think that Hamilton is not in his soul anti-Republican. I don't think Madison ever thought that. Jefferson might have thought that, but I don't think Madison thought that. But that they think his policies are not following what they agreed upon at the ratification conventions in terms of what the Constitution means. We think of political parties today as a kind of two-party system that's just all about winning election. That's not the way Madison is thinking about it originally. He's thinking about establishing in America a vehicle to collect public opinion and bring it to have its effect on government.
We have a few other important milestones in Madison's career. We've been talking about his service in Congress in the 1790s. He then goes on and helps to draft the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions opposing the constitutionality of the Sedition Acts. And then, of course, he goes on to serve in the Jefferson administration as Secretary of State and then becomes president. He served 2 terms from 1809 to 1817. He presided over the War of 1812 against Great Britain, which he helped to initiate. That also led to a fissure in U.S. politics, leading New England to consider secession. How should we think about Madison's constitutional achievements as president?
You know, at the time, Madison was a very popular president, which today we would find very odd because we don't think Madison, when we list who were the best presidents, Madison is not high on that list. And sometimes the War of 1812 is called Mr. Madison's War. You know, he and Jefferson are trying to get the British to lower their trade barriers with us. And England has an upper hand. And even though we have fought a revolution, the British are still controlling the seas. And so economically, they have the upper hand. And Madison thinks we can put pressure on them so that there'll be reciprocity, is what he calls it. Hamilton tells them, oh, you are so wrong, Madison, Jefferson. You people don't understand economics and you don't understand the British and how they'll act. Hamilton might have been right about that in the 1790s, but Jefferson persists and Madison persists, and they get into the embargo and the war. And ironically, this is exactly how manufacturing really gets jump-started in the United States because of the War of 1812, because we're no longer then trading with the British. So we have to make our own things at home. And so glass factories really get going in Pennsylvania and all kinds of new industries, and they start to thrive. So that's what Madison is most known for during his days in the executive. He liked to do his homework. He was so good behind the scenes. And then persuading people because they knew that probably no one had thought it through more than he had. Robert Frost once, in giving a commencement address, said, I've been reading the Federalist Papers lately, and I've been thinking about this thing called the American Dream. He said, what is it? And who dreamed it? Who was the best dreamer? He said, was it George Washington? Was it Thomas Jefferson? Was it Gouverneur Morris? He said, well, because I've been reading the Federalist Papers, I have come to see that the best dreamer of the American dream was James Madison. And he said what Madison was trying to do, this is Frost, he said, was to establish a government in a land in which the people are in self-control. And then Frost says, I'm going to say some poems. And the poems he would say at the end of a little talk always had something to do with the theme he was developing. And he said the poem Birches, which is all about moderation. He also said the poem The Gift Outright. And then in this address, he said, it's like a metronome. Frost said, measure is the thing. Measure. And that's how Frost captured Madison. Basically, he's telling us that this whole idea of self-government, which is at the absolute core of what Madison believed in, these are Madison's aspirations for America. Measure is the thing.
When we return, filmmaker Ken Burns reflects on how life is a struggle between reason and passion, and he often turns to practices like mindfulness, kindness, and humor as a way to restore tranquility.
Mr. Madison is a character who has long been in public life, and what is very remarkable, every person seems to acknowledge his greatness. He blends together the profound politician with the scholar. In the management of every great question, he evidently took the lead in the convention. And though he cannot be called an orator, he is a most agreeable, eloquent, and convincing speaker. From a spirit of industry and application which he possesses in a most eminent degree, he always comes forward the best informed man of any point in debate. The affairs of the United States he perhaps has the most correct knowledge of any man in the Union. William Pierce, member of the Continental Congress, 1787.
This is Pursuit, the Founder's Guide to Happiness. I'm Jeffrey Rosen, President and CEO of the National Constitution Center. Earlier in 2025, I had the privilege of sitting down with filmmaker Ken Burns to talk about the founders and the role of virtue in their lives. We reflected on the challenges of pursuing tranquility in a world that often rewards the opposite. I learned when interviewing Ruth Bader Ginsburg to sit in the silences, because that was when she was about to say something really significant. And just, even though it's uncomfortable, just let it be. And tranquility was the central goal of Cicero, which Jefferson and Franklin and Quincy Adams cited as their main manual on happiness. He who is neither exuberant nor despondent, he has achieved the calm self-mastery of which we're in quest. He is the calm and tranquil man. How does one cultivate that tranquility of soul?
Well, it's very difficult in an environment that actually rewards passions and addictions and sort of gross manifestations. Passions are okay within a limit, but I think what we're looking for is a way in which we engage a kind of moderation in the consumption of things, whatever that might be, that we moderate our talk. As you said, I think that silence is important. I do lots of interviews, and sometimes you want to just jump in with the next question, but you realize if you wait and wait, something happens. Not just somebody's going to say something that's great, a pearl from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or from, I interviewed Barack Obama, but also just listen what happens when I say, wait. And then suddenly the moment opens up and it's pregnant with possibility and meaning and all of those sorts of things. That's the only thing that we can do. There is an asceticism that is unattractive today because we are in a materialistic, transactional, consumptive kind of situation. And everything that works to the human's soul's advantage are the opposites of all that. You're looking for transformation, not transaction. You're looking for less, not more. You're looking for freedom from habits and addictions. And those are really hard to go up against. We take ourselves way too seriously. And I remember my best friend, who I meet with every Sunday for brunch, and we're now two old men. We've known each other for more than 50 years. And he'd once told me back in college, I was struggling in artifice. And he said, there's only one center of the universe, and you're not it. And it seemed like a cruel thing for a friend to say, my best friend to say. It was so generous. It was so grateful to be able to have that wisdom then to understand it. Not that he's not needed me at other times.
And that's why Adams and Jefferson in old age, reading old friends, joking, experiencing tranquility, are such a beautiful vision of virtue.
I agree completely. It moves me to tears when I contemplate that friendship and that correspondence. Friendship would require more being together, but it's a correspondence between two people. They have achieved something. We are in a society that values youth. We're more interested in that. And we actually isolate our older people. We don't even want to have them live in the same house with us. Once we've got our own kids, they've got to go to Florida, they got to go someplace else, or you've got to go someplace else. And yet, the older you get, the chances are, not always, but the chances are that you are achieving a form of tranquility or beginning a journey towards tranquility that allows you to exhale a little bit, maybe follow your breath and see the kind of the beauty in ordinary things, the white and yellow and purple, red that are here in this room. I've already noticed it a couple times, and we just have that ability to be more precise in the way we see things and the way we relate to human beings, and extend to them the possibility, as William Siegel said, that they may be angels. They are angels, and maybe they don't know it, and maybe they're not manifesting that.
Beautiful. I'm now looking at the bright yellow and the beige.
Right. Suddenly it's there. You have these people in your peripheral vision. It's such a wonderful thing. So every view is different. And then what if I could acknowledge that your view is as important?
And to see the colors here is different, but to realize that people all have the light within. And I did have that moment of seeing everyone as angels on the subway. It was at the old Penn Station, just walking along, and people look all sorts of different shapes and colors and sizes. But I saw that they were all the same because they all have the same light within.
Exactly.
All perfect.
And you can do that. I ride the subway all the time when I'm in New York City. And a practice that I've had for a long time since I was a little boy, driving on the highway and passing a car, is that they not only are seeing the exact opposite of what I'm seeing in that limited circumstance, but their lives are as full as mine. And so when that subway car goes the other way, when the A train going uptown passes the A train going downtown, and you look at a face for a second, their lives are as full as mine, and yet I operate as if I am the center of the universe out of which everything exists. And man, it isn't the case. And it's one of the great maturing things is to give up that centrality.
For myself, having from the first moment of maturing a political opinion down to the present one, never ceased to be a votary of the principle of self-government. James Madison, in a letter from 1821.
A few years ago, I was going through a tough time, and I felt like I'd lost a sense of security. I shared this with a friend who told me wisely that security is an illusion. That reminded me that life is shaped by the mind, and we can find tranquility at any moment. Later, I was walking in Rock Creek Park, and the music and lyrics for this song came to me at the same time. The song is called Security is an Illusion. Here's Jennifer Blythe at the piano, accompanying the baritone James Martin.
Security is an illusion. We won't find it when we pray. And when I see confusion, I look for it in the day. 'Cause I know nothing, I feel everything, I sing something, I kneel for nothing but wisdom and beauty and joy in the trees around me, and harmony and pity and compassion for those around me. Security is an illusion. I won't find it when I pray. Futurity is an intrusion on being present every day. Oh, the beauty of the world when you're in nature. Oh, the beauty of the world when you're at peace. It's the duty of the world when you're in nature to take yourself to the quiet place. Oh, the pleasures of the world when you're in nature. Oh, the measure of the world when you're at peace. It's the treasure of the world when you're in nature. I'll take my harmonies and wrap 'em up like a golden fleece.
Thanks for listening, friends. I'm thrilled that my new book is out now. It's called The Pursuit of Liberty: How Hamilton versus Jefferson Ignited the Lasting Battle Over Power in America. Please order online or check it out at a bookstore near you. Pursuit The Founder's Guide to Happiness is produced by PRX Productions for the National Constitution Center. From PRX, the team is Genevieve Sponsler, Courtney Florentine, David Newtown, Sandra Lopez Monsalve, Tommy Bazarian, and Pedro Rafael Rosado. The executive producer of PRX Productions is Jocelyn Gonzalez. James Madison was portrayed by Rishikesh Hirway. William Pierce was portrayed by the great Bill Pollack. From the NCC, our team is Annie Stone, Griffin Ritchie, and Bill Pollack. Music and lyrics by Jeffrey Rosen, with arrangements by Greg Stroman. The songs and incidental music feature baritone James Martin, with Jennifer Blythe at the piano and Greg Stroman on trombone for the theme song. I'm Jeffrey Rosen. In our next episode, we'll discuss the virtuous life of John Quincy Adams with David Wallstreicher. This podcast was made possible with the support of the John Templeton Foundation.